To the modern eye, the Bible often appears as a self-contained library, a collection of ancient texts to be analyzed, decoded, or used as a moral compass. Yet, if we look through the lens of the early church, we discover a startling truth. The Bible was never meant to be a standalone book. Instead, Scripture is more like a musical score that only finds its full resonance when performed within this symphony of the liturgy. As Brant Petra often emphasizes, to understand the New Testament, one must master the language of the Old. When we do this, we see that the Eucharist is not a late addition to the Christian story, but the very hinge upon which all of salvation history turns. The journey begins not in the upper room, but in the dust of Egypt. The Passover was not merely a historical event to be remembered, it was a liturgical sacrifice that had to be consumed. For the ancient Israelite, a sacrifice was not finished when the blood was shed. It was finished when the family sat down to eat the lamb. This creates a Eucharistic pattern that haunts the pages of the Old Testament. From the manna that fell like dew to the bread of the presence, the lechem hapanim, kept in the tabernacle, God was training his people to recognize that his presence is intrinsically linked to sustenance. Scripture was the record of these encounters, written by a people whose very identity was forged at the table of the Lord. Perhaps the most profound reflection on this relationship is found on the road to Emmaus. We see the risen Christ performing the first Mass for two dejected disciples. He begins with the table of the Word, opening the Scriptures to show how every prophet and psalm pointed to him. Yet, remarkably, their hearts burned, but their eyes remained shut. It is only in the breaking of the bread, the unmistakable Eucharistic action, that the scales fall away. This tells us something vital about the nature of the Bible. Scripture is a road map, but the Eucharist is the destination. The Word prepares the heart, but the sacrament opens the eyes. We often forget that for decades, the early Christians had no New Testament. They had the Eucharist. When the Gospels and epistles were eventually written, they weren't intended for private bookshelves. They were written to be proclaimed aloud during the Lord's Supper. The Church did not choose which books to include in the Bible based on a popular vote, but based on what was being read at the altar. If a text didn't harmonize with the Eucharistic faith of the apostles, it wasn't considered Scripture. In this sense, the Eucharist is the cradle of the Bible. The written word was born from the worshiping community to serve the sacramental life of that community. To separate the Bible from the Eucharist is to tear the soul from the body. As Dei Verbum beautifully reminds us, the Church venerates the divine Scriptures just as she venerates the body of the Lord. They are two tables in one banquet hall. When we approach the Bible today, we should do so with the humility of the disciples at Emmaus. We read the Word not just to gain information about the past, but to prepare ourselves for an encounter in the present. The Eucharist remains the hermeneutical key to the Bible, the light that turns the black and white ink of the page into the living, breathing presence of the Word made flesh.